seen a lot of these stickers before, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating their little introductions, but I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. So the panel is Weight Loss Mastermind, so I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. We have Emily first. You guys are not sitting in my order. Emily is a degree qualified nutritionist with her master's degree in obesity science and management. Originally conventionally trained in the calories in, calories out approach, she soon realised that that's not necessarily the case, and she discovered the low-carbohydrate approach. We've got Katie. Katie Landers. Katie has an incredible sort of transformation story. She's lost 50 pounds and tried everything before that, from low-fat diets to counting calories and whatnot. She discovered the paleo diet and lifestyle in her life changed forever. She began losing weight effortlessly, eating the most delicious and nutritious foods. Not only she was sleeping soundly, her skin was glowing, and having turned 50, she has become more energetic than she can remember. Through her work as a nutrition coach, Katie shares her passion to help empower people to transform their lives, lose weight, and to be full of vitality, eating the food their body was designed to eat. Then we've got Julia from Germany. Julia Tulipen is a biologist and works as a nutritional coach. Sorry, Austria. That's in Germany. I love Vienna. In Vienna, she built one of the biggest German paleo and low-carb blogs, but the German speaking, writes books, and recently started a podcast show, The Evolution Radio Show. She is a self-confessed science geek. Sam probably needs no introduction, but Sam Feltham is a master personal trainer from the European Institute of Fitness. He's the author of the Amazon bestseller Slimology and the founder of Smash the Fat Fitness and Fat Loss Boot Camps. The fun thing about Sam is that he was on the red carpet of the second Thor movie, dressed up as Thor, topless and wielding a hammer to entertain the audience.
Scroll through my Twitter page if you want to see it.
Alright, so without further ado, we're going to get into the very fascinating topic of weight loss. The one thing that always comes up is the calories. Do calories matter? Does it matter how many calories we eat? Is it about the calories in, calories out, or is it about the type of calories and what foods they come from? What's everyone's opinion? Emily?
Okay, I'll take it off. My kind of short answer would be that it's not all just about calories in equals calories out, it's about the quality of the calories. However, calories will matter. At some point, calories do come into play. And if I look at it from my approach, predominantly sort of the kind of low carbohydrate, ketogenic kind of way of looking at weight loss, quite a lot of the stumbling blocks, what people do is they up their fat quite a lot, and which is kind of the right way to go with that approach, but sometimes it's far too much, and we get a lot of people thinking they can still eat in excess of 3,000 calories coming from butter, coconut oil, etc. And apart from obviously Sam's also experiments, which we can talk about. Put it in context. The calories will come into play. And it's not to say that you need to go excessively low calorie, it's nothing to do along those lines, but it will come into play effectively. And where we find, quite often where I find, obviously from a nutrition standpoint, is that it generally comes into play when people are stalling or plateauing, or there's just other aspects going on that we really need to take into account the overall picture. So it is very much about quality, but quantity does still need to be taken into account.
Katie, do you have anything to add to that point? Yeah.
Just that it's not just about calories in and calories out, but how you store those calories. And for instance, myself, 5 years ago when I was carrying a lot more weight, there are certain things that I couldn't eat that I can now, and that our bodies are continually changing with our age and with stress and what's going on in our lives. And it's so much dependent on the person at that time and how their body is dealing with it. And if you are eating a nutrient-dense food, you don't have to worry about calories so much. So if you are filling your plate with a certain amount of protein and a lot of vegetables, calories don't come into it. But exactly what Emily said about, of course they matter, at the same time.
Yeah, Julia, what's your approach in that?
Yeah, I pretty much agree, but I think, yes, calories matter, but so calories count, but don't count calories. Because I think, I think you should be able to control the amount of food you're taking in with the kind of foods you're eating. So food quality and all of that is going to influence your hunger, your satiety, and I think that's the most important approach. And even maybe if that's not sufficient, you could look into calories, but I still think it's not really possible to count calories accurately, and you maybe can count what's going in, but you don't know what your body's going to do with it or how much you're just pooping out. And so there are a lot of different factors influencing that.
Yeah, and our body burn calories not just when we exercise, and I think people also get that various activities can change that. And Sam, what kind of experiments did you perform?
For anybody that hasn't seen, I did these overfeeding self experiments where I had 3 different diets that I did for 21 days each, with 3-month washout period in between, so I returned to biochemical normality. And on the first one, it was a low-carb, high-fat diet of real foods. Basically, I put on 1 kilo over those 21 days, and actually lost 3 centimeters from my waist. And then the second one was a low-fat, high-carb, fake foods diet, so things like cereal and skim milk, lasagna, fat-free garlic bread as well. And on that one, I put on just over 7 kilos, and I actually put on 9¼ centimetre around my waist. And when you account for the protein, fibre, and all the exercise that I was doing, there's a difference of 63 net calories between the 2 experiments. So they're basically the same, as much as I could count the calories and as accurate as I could be. The net calorie surplus was the same, but the amount of weight gain was actually 6 kilos. So, and this has kind of been shown in a lot of metabolic ward studies. There's some really good ones that were done in the 90s by a Canadian researcher called Claude Bouchard, who took 7 pairs of identical twins, put them under 24-hour surveillance for 100 days, and he did 1 experiment with overfeeding, so he overfed them 1,000 calories a day over their calorie maintenance, and the range of weight gain was from 1½ kilos to 7½ kilos. So there's kind of serious variability there. The identical twins had similar weight gain, but even within the twins themselves, there were still differences, despite everything being controlled for 100 days. And then he did the reverse, where he had them cycle for up to burning 1,000 calories, as accurate as you can be on an indoor bicycle. And it was pretty much the same. There was weight loss of 1½ kilos to 7½ kilos. So it's really variable from person to person, even in a metabolic ward study where you have people accurately tracking your calories in and your calories out. Now, again, that's not to say that quantity doesn't matter. Quantity certainly does matter, because the more you eat, the more insulin you secrete, essentially. And I mean, it's quite telling at a population level here in the UK, calories have actually gone down 20% in the past 30 years. That's an interesting report by the Institute of Economic Affairs called Big Fat Lies. And basically it's more about dealing with your biochemistry and dealing with the physics. And you know, if you eat less, then you secrete less insulin. And so it's an intricate relationship, but somewhere in between quality and quantity lays the truth.
Yeah, and I mean, we can also talk about things like what just made me think about your low-carb, high-fat diet would have been much better for your gut health than the cereals. So your gut microbiome had a lot to do with that weight loss as well. So,
Oh yeah, I suspect so.
You know, or fibre that you consume and that sort of thing. So.
Also, I think it's important that if you eat less calories for 2 weeks, you will lose weight, but it's not sustainable for the rest of your life, and you're working against your body, and in the end your body will out and want more food. It's just not a sustainable way, and it's not a healthy way to move forward.
Okay, great answers. So now we're going to move on to the next highly discussed topic, is carbohydrates. And are they good? Are they bad? Is the low carbohydrate diet the best way to lose weight? What about maintaining once you've lost that weight? Should you still be on the same amount of carbohydrates? Does it matter what source of carbohydrates we're talking about? Is it from starch vegetables or not? And also, I think a lot of people are probably not sure what is considered to be very low carbohydrate versus medium carbohydrate versus high. So can we talk a little bit about those points? We can split it up between you if you want.
You'll be
Emily?
Yeah, Em's the most qualified.
Take over your question. If you could have like a different opinion on that sort of debate.
I think, I mean, obviously we're very much know in terms of low carbohydrate and that type of thing, but I would probably still hold my hands up and say it's maybe not 100% the right approach for everyone, particularly predominantly keto as well. I think you've got to very much take an individual approach with it. I think if we look at the spectrum, so the problem, if you like, with low carbohydrate is there's no kind of definitive guide, if you like, out there. There's not sort of classifications, but the approach that I take, so on the very kind of ketogenic spectrum, would be around about a 50-gram level per day or less. The more kind of insulin resistant that you are, metabolic syndrome, etc., you probably need to even go a little bit lower, around about 20 grams per day. I know that, so Dr. Eric Westman in Duke, he has everyone starting off at 20 grams per day, and then obviously we kind of look at increasing from there, or some people just stay at that level. You then have what I would sort of call more of a lower carb, and I would say between about 50 to about 80 grams, and then a little bit more on the moderate side is about 80 to 120 grams. I personally, that's the highest I kind of go up with a lot of my clients that I see. I see a very specific kind of group of people as well, and I think that it's very much about the source as well. I think we can all be in agreement that it's obviously, the refined grains, the sugar, etc. I think everyone is, it's kind of a no-brainer on those fronts. I think the dense vegetables, yes, can obviously be debated about, so sweet potatoes, parsnips, anything along those lines. I think it's very much dependent on the person coming into it. So if you are someone that, as I said, is very metabolically broken, and it's on the doctor panel earlier, I don't know if anyone was sitting in that, it's very much, it's about getting a history on the person, and it's very dependent on what they've done in their past. It's very dependent on where they're at this point. And also, when you come into it, 6 months down the line, you might be very different and need very different things, so it can constantly change from there. I think that most of us in the general population probably eat too many carbohydrates as a whole, so I do think that a lot of this problem, we just kind of cut back on that level. I know people can probably debate a little bit more on that, I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, can we get another point of view, or maybe in addition to that you think?
So in terms of what the actual scientific evidence shows, is that there's been 44 randomised controlled trials between low carb and low fat diets, so low carb being below 25% and ideally at least below 130 grams as defined by Professor Richard Feynman, and that was in comparison to low fat golden guidelines counting calories. And in 40 of those randomised controlled trials, low-carb dieters lose more weight, and 24 of those 40 are statistically significant. Low-fat dieters lose more weight in 2 of those, with 0 being statistically significant. So looking at that basis, and those are all the 44, those are all the randomised controlled trials for the past 30 years, based on that, low-carb diets are the best place to start, and I think that's kind of the main thing, is that it's a good place to start, because we don't have an algorithm, unfortunately. in order to find out from people's genetics, current biochemical status, in terms of where they should start. Perhaps one day we'll have a formula where we can work all that out, like depending on their amylase levels and everything, their gut microbiome and things like that.
Yeah,
But
and amylase is the way that how you absorb carbohydrates.
Yeah, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, how you process stuff.
Which is a genetic thing. So some people find that low carbohydrates don't work for them as well as others, right?
Yeah, thanks for putting that in proper terms, instead of just saying. But yeah, that's right, correct. But basically, for the moment, until we get that amazing algorithm, maybe Google can help us out, then the best place to start is with a low-carb diet. And I think, Entomology, the book available on Amazon, what I recommend doing is that you start off, first 4 weeks, 50 grams or less, and then after that, for the next 4 weeks, 75 grams or less, and then for the 4 weeks after that, 100 grams or less is kind of a good guideline to start with. And if you start to gain weight or your weight loss stalls during any of that time, then you know that you should kind of go back to the previous 4 weeks in terms of 50 grams or 75 grams or 100 grams. And then you can kind of adapt the carbohydrate levels depending on your physical activity as well.
Cool. Another point that I wanted to focus on was about, we talked a little bit about intermittent fasting, or fasting in general. So it's 5-2 diet has been quite popular, where you restrict calories a couple of days a week. For some people it's fasting between 7 p.m. and 11 a.m. the next morning. What are your thoughts on that as an approach for weight loss, as a sort of, not a temporary solution, but as to lose weight, but also to maintain? Katie or Julia, would you like to start on that?
I think that, again, it depends on where the person is. If they want to clean up their diet, that's the first place to start. It depends if someone's been eating a highly processed diet. I really don't think intermittent fasting is the place to go. Then it would be about bringing in natural, real foods. And I find it doesn't always work very well with women, and it does with men. It's so individual. And at the same time, all of this is, if someone's having a lot of cravings and they think, well, I've got a smaller window in which to eat. But actually, you've got to look at why those cravings are happening. And a lot of this eating that's happening between meals is emotional. Maybe someone is wanting to numb their pain with food. It could be so many reasons. And all of this keeps coming down to the individual and what their diet is. And it can work really well for someone who's reached a plateau but has got a clean diet. But I wouldn't go from not being paleo and not eating clean to intermittent fasting. I'd go for cleaning up the diet first.
And Julia, in your kind of experience, have you seen success?
I think intermittent fasting or fasting in general can be a good way to kind of reset. If you have adapted a few habits you want to change, it can be a good starting point. I'm not sure if it's really good for weight loss, even though there are good outcomes for some people. But I also think that it's for some people it could start off a problem with disturbed eating behavior, or if especially women have a history of eating disorders. I think that's kind of very important to keep in mind and to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. That healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Just jump in on that a little bit and I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. Actually, I shadowed Dr. Jason Fung in Toronto as part of my trip. And I don't know if anybody knows Jason, probably a lot of people nod in their head in the room. If you don't, I definitely look him up. He's probably one of the world's leading experts on fasting at the minute. And he presented at South Africa when we were at the conference, and he had said how he gets his patients to fast for 2 weeks at a time. And to me, it sounded crazy, but
And is it fasting sort of
Yep, so basically, so I went along to Toronto and sat in a lot of his clinics, and I mean, I actually genuinely do not believe him in the first instance, but he has people that are fasting, and I heard from his assistant most recently, and they had someone on for 30 days of fasting. Now, I'm not saying that I'm...
Just water?
They had bone broth.
Yeah.
They had bone broth, and Jason's theory is around the fasting, so it's obviously about not having this stimulation of insulin. So we obviously know that the theory also around this insulin aspect, but Jason does take it one step further and looks at other aspects that either promote insulin release or can obviously be protective of it, if you like. So his ones are fiber can actually be a little bit protective, so he does allow people in his program to have things like chia seeds in water. And obviously the other major thing is cortisol. So he talks a lot about sleep and all the aspects to do with stress around it. And his model is actually a really good model. And he actually had people, so again, I would have always been on the stance of do not do fasting or intermittent fasting unless you're kind of adapted, unless your diet is very there. He had patients coming in who their diet's terrible, and their diet still is terrible, but they manage, and he comes at it very much, so he is a, what's the word, a diabetic doctor? What's the proper word for that? A nephrologist. So he's a nephrologist, but that's kind of his day job. So he sees a lot of patients who are very, very, really ill with diabetes. They're almost losing limbs. They're almost at end-stage kidney failure. He's having patients who are regaining kidney function back, and that is almost unheard of in the medical profession. And he has these people coming on, and their diet is terrible before they start it, and they're doing fine. So it's kind of, I would have always been, unless you're adapted, and I still think we have to be very careful with fasting, and we don't, it's like with everything though, it can't be the new thing, and we can't be saying that, because I do think that for some people with food addiction problems or food behaviour problems or eating disorders, you've got to be very, very careful, but that's the psychology behind it. And if you are going to do it, particularly if you're on certain medications, there's all these things that come into play with it, but we are now finding that it could be another tool, it could be an effective tool, and there's different types of kind of fasting as well, so that's the very extreme forms. The other forms that they do is 24-hour fast, 36-hour fast, and people, they can lose a significant amount of weight, which can then be regained when they eat, but it's actually, when you look at the net effect, they still have lost more than what they actually regain. So I'm not saying that everyone needs to fast by any means, and if you are going to do it, you should really seek medical, and have that person along with you, because it can be very dangerous if done wrong, particularly if you're on medication.
Yeah, it's important to monitor your stats.
But it could be another tool. So.
Absolutely. You mentioned things like sleep, and besides food, because we tend to focus on food, what are the most important factors in weight loss? Is it reducing stress? Is it exercise? Is it the right type of exercise? Is it sleep? What are your thoughts? Sam, we'll start from that side.
So my thoughts are that it's a biochemical balance, and it's a bit of a ballet inside your body, basically, with all of the hormones in terms of insulin, cortisol, even melatonin, and it's all about getting them in the correct balance. And with modern lifestyles and modern diets, we've knocked it all out of balance, and you just need to rein it all back in by doing all those things, sleeping correctly so that your circadian rhythm, and that's your 24-hour cycle of hormones, and your melatonin, your sleep hormone, gets back into a normal rhythm. Also cortisol, which has a massive effect in terms of releasing glycogen, and so releases more insulin. That's one of the mechanisms that cortisol affects.
And what controls that hormone? Is it the sleep?
Sleep has an effect on cortisol, because if you're not getting enough sleep during the day, you're going to get more stressed. But then also, I think outlook on life kind of plays a big play on this, and this is why I'm big on ancient philosophy, which sounds really spurious, but trying to control your emotions using stoicism is kind of a sound approach, because what would used to happen, kind of, again, looking at this in an evolutionary way, is that the only time that you'd actually secrete cortisol was when you had that fight or flight response, and in that response you'd exert a lot of energy. So if you came across another hunter-gatherer tribe, and then you secrete cortisol and adrenaline and everything like that, and you have a fight right there and then you're burning all of that glycogen off that cortisol's releasing. Or if you come across a bear and you leg it, then you're burning all the energy that cortisol's releasing, right? But these days, if you're at work, you have an argument at work, or your boss tells you to do something you don't want to do, you get stressed, you release cortisol, which releases glycogen, which releases insulin, then you don't exercise afterwards, you don't exert that energy. And so that's kind of the vicious cycle that's going on there. And then sleep plays a role in that, and it's, yeah, so chill out, it's okay. And then sleep better.
Yeah, Julia, what would you say is the most important factor for you?
Sleep quality and stress reduction is definitely extremely important. And there was actually a study done with healthy subjects. They sleep deprived them for 24 hours, and all of those subjects got insulin resistant, like type 2 diabetic. So that's how much of an impact has sleep deprivation. So I think that's very, very important. And melatonin is a very potent antioxidant. So that is also very important to look at. So,
yeah. Katie, in your transformation, did you find, what was there, besides food and changing your diet, what was another thing that really helped you to shift?
It's the whole lifestyle. It's got everything to do with food, but it's also got absolutely nothing to do with food. Because, you know, we say we are what we eat, but we also eat what we are. And if we're sleep deprived, and, you know, that makes us hungrier. And if we're stressed, we start craving. So it's also managing your stress and having tools that you can put into place that make you not turn to food. So it's a whole holistic approach, and everything is so interlinked. But I would agree the two things are sleep and stress. But it's all perspective. You can't take the stress away. It's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Emily, do you have anything to add quickly to that?
No, I think the other maybe exciting area that's going to start coming out is the gut.
The gut,
yeah.
I don't think we know enough about it. But I think that
you haven't
all
been
about the gut.
all about the gut.
Okay, we'll have time for a couple of questions. Is there anything that anybody wanted to ask? A specific question to the, that they've had for what, gentlemen back. I think they wanted to go and record.
It's just worth mentioning that fasting time, you've got the Joe the Juicer film, two of those out there, the fats at the end of the day. I think he went to the fastest of like 40, 50 days.
On juice fasting?
Yes, now obviously that's so like it was that. And obviously certain metabolites and things like that. But he essentially didn't eat for that period. He lost vast amount of weight, obviously. And he's now sort of evangelical.
And how's his health in general?
Well,
Does it talk about that?
Massively.
Yeah, no.
But he had to sort of be watched all the time.
Yeah.
Essentially under starvation. And somewhere along the line, there is a truth in all of this. We can go without eating for a long time. The question is, how do you maintain it? And of course, he put a lot of weight on him. He's lost it. Broadly speaking, he's looking a lot better than he did, obviously. But he's traveling all around the world telling everybody to reduce. It's not the juice.
No, yeah, it's not the juice that's doing it. It's a massive calorie restriction.
I just mentioned it because it's another facet on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Any other questions, gentlemen, from that side?
One each to the other.
I lost over 2 or 3, 4 years about 25, 30 kilos. It was about 25 to 30% of my weight. And I was not trying to lose weight. I had various little health problems that were chronic, and in order to get rid of them, I modified my diet. And then I asked myself, why? How did I lose the weight? And so my question to you is, although we're each biochemically individual, is it not possible that it's as simple as restoring alkalinity. That is, the term that you can find is acid-alkaline balance or alkaline-acid balance, because although we're biochemically individual, what some say is the blood pH is 7.4 for everybody. It varies during the day between 7.35 and 7.45. And so my question to you is, what do you think about that idea? Because it resolves the paradox between the fact that there are a handful of people who thrive on a vegan diet, and they're not just sickly, emaciated, scrawny vegetarians, of which there are many, but at the same time, there are also people who thrive on a paleo diet. And what do they have in common that's not individual, but is each of these diets make the blood, tissues, the bones more alkaline? So I'm not sure, but what do you think about that is my question.
It's quite possible that certainly has something to do with it. I think there might be issues with cause and effect there, that could be an effect of sorting out all of the other issues in terms of insulin resistance probably being the most prominent. And so you kind of, when you do go, that's why variability of diets can work. The one thing, as well as their pH, balancing to approximately 7.4, their insulin resistance will improve. They'll have decreased insulin and have decreased cortisol, and their overall biochemical balance comes into play. So I think the pH balance of blood has something in there, but it's the whole body. It wouldn't just be the blood, in my opinion.
And we do have time.
Closing remarks and then.
Okay, cool. If you have any other questions for our experts or panels, I'm sure you guys can answer them. There might be some specific questions, and there always are with this topic. Thanks a lot, everybody.